Welcome to our 6th podcast, Discipleship at Home. In the last session, we talked about punishment, a punitive and ineffective form of discipline, as well as the use of emotionalism, both of which are manipulative and non-biblical methods. Today, I would like to talk about principles as well as a specific tool of biblical discipline and how we can have an amazing impact on the discipleship of our children. So let's look at principles of biblical discipline that do help change the child. Discipline is a powerful tool. And the first one here is parents must deal with the heart issues, not just behavior. So it's not all about just talking about the bad behavior. It's helping to understand why this is bad. You know, not just it's bad because I said so. Do what I say. Well, and I'm talking about kids who are in grade school or older. Explain to them, what does God say? You do this, I disciplined you because God says you should not lie, and you lied. And look up verses if you can. Maybe have them memorize a verse if this is something they're offending all the time in. But you want to deal with heart issues, not just behavior issues. Number 2, discipline must always be corrective, not punitive. So punitive, remember we said that's often it's out of anger, but you're disciplining them for what they did wrong, but it doesn't correct them to do what's right. And so we want to emphasize corrective measures. Here's a verse here in Proverbs 3:12. For whom the Lord loves, he reproves, even as a father corrects a son in whom he delights. So this is all out of love. There's a illustration about two fathers that were at a conference, and one of the fathers said, I'm too hard on my kids. I really have to be, though. My wife loves them too much to discipline them. The other dad replied, I guess you and your wife have to strike some sort of balance. The first dad responded, yes, we need some balance between discipline and love. We might chuckle at that, though, because discipline is done out of love, right? It's not one or the other. Discipline is an expression of love. For example, here's a verse here. He who withholds the rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. See, discipline is a measure, an expression of love for our child. Number 3, character is developed as the child learns to obey God and his word, not merely his parents. So they start out by just obeying the parents because the parents told them to, as preschoolers and so forth. But then they begin to learn that, yes, they have to do what their parents said, but it's because of what God said. The parents are following God's word. And there's an authority behind this that's even higher than the parents. And so that when the child leaves the house, there's an authority that he follows as a believer. Not just, now what would Dad do or what would Dad say? No, what does God say? And they've been taught that already. Or anything like that, but there are reasons. So let's look at some methods of biblical discipline. The first one here is discipleship of our children requires communication. Communication is so important when it comes to discipling our children. And a lot of this is that we're talking about is child rearing principles. But we're interested in not only for our kids to be good citizens and be a good example to others and to go to church. We're wanting them to become followers of Jesus, and so that's the end result, that they are followers of Jesus, and they'll raise their own kids to be followers of Jesus. So discipleship requires communication. Now, communication is a two-way system, right? If I'm lecturing my kid about something that may not be bad, I'm not saying that's bad, but is that communication? It's one half. I mean, communication is a two-way street. So if it's all coming this way to them, it's not communication. It's me telling. And this is important, especially as the child gets older. In grade school, but especially in their teen years, if you haven't established that a relationship of in grade school years, when they become teenagers, there's going to be rebellion there, and they're not going to come to you and discuss it. So communication is a two-way street. Now, my wife did a really good job of communication, much better than I did. And she would literally, at times when they were teenagers especially, spend an hour or 2 hours discussing something, and all the whys and answering the but questions and so forth, and calmly just discussing it as long as it took. And she had that open door and did a really good job there of communication. And it's just so important as a child gets older. Ted Tripp wrote a book, Sharpening the Hearts of the Child. It's a good book. You might want to read that. It's all about shepherding the heart of a child by Ted Tripp. And he's talking about here the kinds of questions that you use are important. You know, just giving the questions that require yes or no answer isn't that productive. So, but questions that will cause the child to think through something and discuss it with you is very helpful. Here's a few examples of some questions. What were you feeling when you hit your sister? Or what did your sister do to make you mad? How did hitting her seem to make things better? What was the problem with what she was doing to you? How should you have responded? How do you think your response demonstrated trust in God's provision? Or how did it demonstrate the lack of trust? You see how these questions open up an opportunity for a little bit of a discussion here. And it's more effective to shepherd his heart than just tell him to do something and or trying to get a yes or no answer. Yes?
At what age do you recommend this? My 3-year-old would not.
No, this is grade school age. Little children like that can't really get into that kind of dialogue. But, yes?
Sometimes when my son wears pants, we'll ask him, hey, and why do you wear pants? He'll say, like, well, because I want to put my pants. Or...
See, that's the answer. And that's a good illustration that they're not ready to really discuss something at that age. You don't necessarily give them a spanking because they pooped in their pants. It takes a little time to potty train them and so forth, but they're learning what to do and what not to do, aren't they? Yes?
One of the things my mom did with me when we were kids, and I did with my kids, right from their birth, when you put them to sleep, she would sing hymns to you or sing you to sleep or pray with you, and that was your time of being alone with mom and having little conversations, whether it was about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but it grew as you grew, and that was an open time to talk about things, and they don't want to go to bed anyway, so they'll stay up all night talking to you.
Yes.
And it's a great time to get them to converse with you without any distractions.
Yeah, and if they're sincere in their question answering or their discussion, it might be worth allowing them to stay up a half an hour longer. If it's something that they're really inquiring about and really teachable moments. Because now we're dealing with something really important. Here's 8 forms of communication. This also comes from Ted Tripp. He talks about encouragement is really key. We want to really emphasize encouragement. It's not about always correcting. It's definitely not about criticism. Correction is good. Criticism is bad. And call them stupid and that's dumb, what you did. And encouraging has so much more impact as far as helping a child to be motivated to do what's right. Always look for opportunities to compliment. Even God did that with Jesus. Now, I don't know if this is the best example of this, but what did he do at his baptism? He said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Listen to him. In other words, he's got something to say. That's an example of us as parents, where we compliment our kids. We say, you're turning into be a great young man. Or, I am so proud of you. I love you so much. And you are really a good big brother to your sister. And just saying things like that, they have to be honest. You're not just making it up, but saying encouraging things to lift them up. It's called, there's something called self-fulfilled prophecy. A self-fulfilled prophecy is when you say something and that child becomes like that. For example, if you tell a child enough that he's stupid or he's worthless, he's going to grow up to be stupid and worthless because that's what he began to believe about himself. But if you tell him honest comments about that they're turning into a good young man, a good boy, that encourages them to be a good boy. I'll never forget what Howard Hendricks says. He was one of my favorite speakers. He went to be with the Lord just a few years ago. He is a professor at Dallas Seminary. And he said, when I was in 6th grade, I was a holy terror. And I went to a Sunday school class, and his teacher said, his new teacher, when he went into a new class in 6th grade, she said, Howie, I've been told by all your teachers of the past that you are a holy terror, that you're a terrible student, and no one can control you, and you disrupt the class. But you know what? I don't believe a word of it. And she began putting her faith in what he will become. And it so changed his life. Now he wanted to do what would please his teacher. And now he wanted to be the kind of person that she said he was going to be. And he said if it wasn't for that teacher, he would have never become the man of God that he was, and a great teacher at Dallas Seminary. Because she changed his life, because now somebody, for the first time in his life, somebody believed in him. And that's a self-fulfilled prophecy. It's not a prophecy in that sense, but it shows the value and impact of encouragement. Always look for things that you can compliment and encourage your kids with. It really has a motivating impact. And then there's correction. Correction is really important as part of communication, and listen to their response and discussing it. Rebuke with love. There's times that we have to rebuke. There's entreaty. Entreaty is when a child or a teenager or whatever keeps going down the wrong path, keep doing the same things that are destructive. And they come to the place where their parents basically are on a level of pleading. And they're saying, if you don't change this, Jimmy, this is what's going to happen. And so that's a real, and all this is in private, of course, but that's what entreaty is. Then there's instruction, and then there's warning. This is the consequences. This is what will happen if you keep doing what you're doing. There's teaching and prayer. All these things are part of communication. Of course, prayer, praying with the child, for the child, and so forth. Even though you're praying to God, this communicates to the child your concern about their growth and God's involvement in their life.